In this video, we're going to go over the Concept 6 teacher talk. On the first one here, it says we need to write a conjecture for each based on the information provided. I want you to go ahead and pause the video now and go ahead and try to make a conjecture for both parts A and B. Remember, a conjecture is a rule based on the observation. So in this case, we're going to make it a rule based on the statements given. So like on this first one here, it says Lynn is taller than Becky, but Becky is taller than Eddie. Well, if we know that Lynn is taller than Becky, but Becky is taller than Eddie, then that would be like the same thing as saying, if we line these up in order, that Lynn is going to be taller than Eddie. We also could have made the conjecture that Eddie is shorter than Lynn, or another way of saying this, but those would all be different conjectures that we could say on this first one. For the second, it says, all Domberstuns have 3 eyes. Joe is a Domberstun. Well, if we know Joe is a Domberstun, and all Domberstuns have 3 eyes, well, then the likely conjecture is that also Joe is going to have 3 eyes. This means that based on the information given to us, we can probably hypothesize that. Go ahead and take a second and pause the video here to answer this question. It says, what is the difference between inductive and deductive reasoning? So go back to your notes if you need to refer to these. In this case, inductive reasoning is always going to be based on observations. So this is where we would look at different cases and then try to form that pattern and then make the conjecture, kind of like what we just did before. Deductive, on the other hand, is going to be based on facts. Okay, that's going to be like based on information that's already been proven true, and then using that reasoning to apply it to other situations. Go ahead and pause the video here and work on number 3. It says, in the following conditional statements, go ahead and underline the hypothesis and circle with the conclusion. And number 4, rewrite the conditional statement in if-then form. And number 5, write the converse of the statement. Okay, let's go ahead and look at number 3 here. The statement here says, if it rains tomorrow, Miss Link will bring her umbrella to school. Well, remember, when we're writing a conditional statement, the conditional statement is always of the form if-then, with the if part being the hypothesis and the conclusion being the then. And so if we look at our statement here, it says, well, if it rains tomorrow, that right there is going to be our hypothesis, but then the then part would be the part that follows. In this case, Miss Link will bring her umbrella to school. That right there is going to be our conclusion. Another way of saying this would be, if it rains tomorrow, then Miss Link will bring her umbrella to school. Again, the hypothesis is coming first, following the conclusion, because it's going to be that conclusion has to be based on the hypothesis. The next one here says, rewrite the conditional statement in if-then form. And the statement is, an even number is divisible by 2. Well, the first part here is that it's an even number. The second part is that it's divisible by 2. The second part is only true if the first part is true. So that means that first part has to be our hypothesis, or the if part. So we can write this as, if a number is even, then it's going to be divisible by 2, because that divisible by 2 part is our conclusion. And is only true if it is following that hypothesis. The next one here is talking about our converse. Remember, the converse of a conditional statement would be the same thing as reversing the hypothesis and the conclusion of the original conditional statement. So if our statement is, if x is odd, then 3x is odd, well, the if part is the x is odd, which is our hypothesis. The then 3x is odd, that is our conclusion. So to write the converse here, we need to go ahead and flip those 2 parts. And that would be the same thing as saying, if 3x is odd, our new hypothesis, then x is odd, which would be our new conclusion. Go ahead and pause the video here and try these last 2 examples. These say, decide if the statements are true or false If they are false, you need to provide a counterexample. So go ahead and try these two. The first one here says that the equation 5x minus 3 equal to 12 has exactly one solution. Well, if it has exactly one solution, we need to figure that out by actually solving this equation or not. So let's go ahead and add 3 over to both sides, which gives us 5x equal to 15. And then go ahead and divide both sides, which gives us x equal to 3. Well, 3 is only one solution, so this statement right here must be true. Let's look at the second one here. And we can always go ahead and check that answer by plugging that in and make sure it works. Now let's look at the second one. It says, if angle A and angle B are supplementary, then the measure of angle A equals 40 degrees, and the measure of angle B equals 140 degrees. So this is saying we have to remember our definition of supplementary, but supplementary means that two angles are going to add up to 180 degrees. Well, indeed, 40 degrees and 140 degrees do add up to 180 degrees, which would make them supplementary. But it is important for us to look at the statement here. It says, if A and B are supplementary. In that case, since this is the hypothesis, then that would mean that the conclusion is the only possible outcome. Or another way of saying that the only two angles, or way two angles can be supplementary, is if one is 40 and one is 140. And that's not true. In this case, we could also go ahead, and this is going to be a false statement. That means we could actually go ahead and have a counterexample here. Take, for example, if the measure of angle A is 150 degrees and the measure of angle B was 30 degrees. Those two angles right there are still supplementary, but that does not prove our statement. So in this case, then that actually is proving it wrong, making this right here a counterexample. So even though the 40 and 140 do add up to 180, since the 40 and the 140 is our conclusion, then that is not going to affect our hypothesis.